Broadcasting live from the IRSMedic studios, it's Parental Advisory. And thanks for joining us today on Parental Advisory. Today we're talking about surprises about living and investing overseas. We've got a few topics to touch on, some a little more interesting than others. Some I struggled with.
They're
some,
all interesting.
They're
You don't think
interesting,
so?
but they're sometimes hard for my brain to grasp. But the first topic we want to touch on today is universal tax jurisdiction and tax suitors. What the hell is that?
Yeah, so universal tax jurisdiction, and this is something that people sort of don't quite get when they expatriate or just live overseas, that there is universal tax jurisdiction for the IRS, and that it doesn't matter where you make money. If it's in this universe, like you can make money on Pluto, that's taxable by the IRS. That's what they mean by universe, I guess. So you need a parallel universe without a parallel IRS in order for that to be tax-free. You need to escape it. So that's something that you have to think about. And there's actually an interesting story about how it all came about and this horrible thing. And the entire blame for it rests on President Lincoln.
Really?
Yeah. Which there's actually a reason why it makes sense. It actually makes sense because we're the only country in the world who does it. There's a few that kind of do, but not really, and they're not really. I don't know if they're really countries. They're they're on a map. They claim to be countries. One of them is North Korea is one that has universal tax jurisdiction, but only for non-North Korean people. So if you're a non-Korean person living and working in North Korea, your worldwide income is taxable because North Koreans live tax-free.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, they're this is the Mecca of liberty. They're tax-free. Yeah. So be careful, right? Be careful. Being tax-free is only part of it, right? It's not the end all.
IRS doesn't seem so bad anymore.
Yeah,
does
right.
It?
No, it really, you know what? It really doesn't.
Yes.
That is one creepy place. Those poor people.
I know.
Oh, my God. What a tragedy.
Now, before you go any further, what's the difference between actually expatriating and just living overseas?
Well, expatriation is the process by which you renounce your U.S. citizenship and give up. And there's a tax return you have to file that says you've been in compliance with the tax for 5 years. You just can't say, yep, that's it. I'm no longer a U.S. citizen. There's a whole bunch of things you have to go through. You might even have to pay an exit tax. And there's ways around that. And there's things you could do to limit that. And the thing is, if you don't file that certificate, you can think you're no longer a U.S. person and say, yep, that's it, IRS, I'm done with you. I've broken through my shackles. And, it's something they haven't really got onto yet. But I imagine in years, in subsequent years, the IRS is going to go and audit people who didn't file. They say, well, no, you're still a U.S. person. Where's your certificate? I mailed it. And then they're going to look and say, well, you haven't filed your taxes in 10 years, and now we're going to hit you with this tax bill. And now you can't really expatriate correctly because you have to be in compliance for the last 5 years. You really want to do it right.
So not to ask a dumb question, but if you're going to renounce your citizenship, do you first have to get accepted in another country? You can be a citizen here.
No, I don't.
Or you just, and then are you officially a citizen of wherever you live?
I don't think that that's part of the requirement. There's no you can just sort of become a citizen of nowhere.
Really,
there really isn't
cool.
Anything. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a citizen.
But I don't know if
of
that's
nowhere.
a good idea though.
Oh.
I mean. I wouldn't advise that.
No?
There's really no requirement I can think of that they need to see a passport of where you live. Now the IRS they used to give you a hard time if they said, well, if you are expatriating for tax purposes only, it doesn't count. But they seem to have relaxed from that language. And I know of no case where they've gone after somebody for saying, well, you've renounced for tax purposes only. You've only renounced because we're so horrible. But that does seem a little bit odd.
Ever since one of the founders of Facebook went overseas, expatriated, they're sort of looking into renewing that where you can't just leave for tax purposes.
Right. Okay. Right. You did find that. That's right. Did we mention that on a previous podcast?
We did.
We did. Okay.
I can't remember which one, but we did. So I think Congress is looking into perhaps making that a law again that you can't just expatriate
because
for
that
tax
was all those
purposes.
Facebook billions. We want that. We don't want those people going. We want that money, and that's not fair.
And then obviously living overseas is just you're living and working in another
you're
country.
living and working overseas. You haven't done anything about your U.S. citizenship, and there's some tax benefits to it. You get a tax credit for the taxes that you pay. Then you also have an exclusion on your tax. So some of the income that you make overseas, up to a certain amount, you don't even have to pay any taxes on at all. So there can be, depending on where you live, you might pay less overall. And we did that in one of our podcast on tax brackets part 2. We had one of our examples moved from high tax San Jose, California to lower tax, I think, Singapore. And she had a significant savings because of the lower taxes there and the exclusion.
Yep.
So there are some big benefits to it, but that doesn't end your filing requirement with the IRS, which is certainly a temptation.
And then tax suitors
Tax suitors?
falls under the universal tax jurisdiction.
Tax what?
Tax suitors?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, really?
No.
That's what you mentioned yesterday, and you wrote it right on the board.
Oh, no. That's tax... I got to read my own handwriting. No, that's tax. I'll get to it.
Okay,
yeah.
we'll get to
I'll
that
figure that out. What did I write there? It's probably something really important. It can
probably
save
really
you
is.
millions of dollars.
Yeah, but it's not tax suitors. That's not a
Oh,
thing.
tax shelters.
Oh. Okay, let me fix my notes.
Yeah. So that's tax shelters, right? So, there's this whole big idea that, and people are still selling these, just go offshore and you can get a tax shelter offshore. There's no magical thing that, because you put some investment overseas that now it's no longer subject to the universal tax jurisdiction. It still is.
Yes.
And that, used to be you used to be able to move stuff. Well, first of all, you'd be able to move stuff overseas and no one would know. So your tax shelter is basically you're evading taxes, you're paying nothing, and no one is ever going to find out unless you anger a wife, business partner, somebody who has all the goods on you, and they drop that off to the IRS. Here's the entire case, all the work done for you. That point, you're going to have a problem. So that's really where you want to make sure you're not angering anyone. And that is sort of how offshore did work, but it was completely illegal. And the Swiss was known for its secrecy. And you know what I like? The Wolf of Wall Street. Did you watch that movie?
No.
And I loved it because there was this great point in it. Because at one point, the wolf, Leonardo DiCaprio, I don't know who he was playing, some guy, he moved money to Switzerland. And all these Swiss bankers were all his buddy because they were, keeping it hiding. But as soon as pressure came, they folded and gave him up. And I was like, that's right.
Yep.
Because that is how it works. All these people who are sworn to secrecy, they'll totally turn on you. You're dealing with somebody who makes money.
Yes.
On dealing with sort of shady things. And here's another thing too. A lot of people overseas, they go and open a bank account and they're moving millions of dollars in it, or maybe not even millions of dollars. And the bankers in especially in Switzerland, and in a place like Panama, they just assume, they'll put it in the name of a shell company. Something like, it'll be some company that's been around forever. Well, you're now the owner of it, and it's all in the name. And they don't really they don't say, the reason why we're doing this, customer, is because we know you want to commit tax evasion. They assume you do, so they just assume you want it in an alter ego, and there's nothing said. We've had clients who didn't know what they were, they didn't know that what was going on. They're like, I don't know why you put it in that. And it's like, well, because you're assuming. And so then we're like, well, but this looks really bad.
Yeah.
This looks really bad. Oh my God, this is not good. And so we were able to deal with that by getting in front of that to say, okay, this person really wasn't trying this.
Yep.
If they only knew there was universal taxation. And also there's one more thing about it, that a lot of people don't think it's taxable until you bring it back into the country. That like, I know it's taxable, I guess, but I thought it's when, you can let it grow overseas. And what you do is you're deferring your taxes.
Right.
So just like, send it overseas. It's just like a giant 401k. And that's a common misconception, people. Well, as soon as I brought it back, I'd pay taxes on it. But why would I pay taxes on it there? Doesn't make any sense.
So they're mistakenly not filing every year. They're not
Right.
doing it intentionally.
Right.
And then they get penalized for it.
It's really, really common
Isn't
for
it
people.
like a 30% penalty or something?
Well, it depends on what kind of penalty you're looking at. If you didn't report the bank account,
Yep.
and that's separate from your tax. If you didn't report the existence of a bank account, that's $10,000 more in the aggregate.
Yep.
That's a penalty of either $10,000 or it could be half of the account value. It's really,
Holy
it's
crap.
really onerous and terrible. And that's what people, as they sort of uncover this horrible onion of stink, like, this can't be right. I mean, how many? I've talked to so many people like this. This just can't be right. All of this, and I guess that's what I have to remember when to me, it seems like the normal thing because I'm used to it. But
Yeah.
you know, we all have this normalcy bias. No matter what crazy thing is going on in your life, if it's been crazy for more than 2 days, you kind of assume it's normal. And that's how that's what I realize I have that about the IRS is so crazy. So for the regular person, this has got to be where you're like, this can't be right. This can't be right because I would owe more than what I'm worth if this is true. That can't be.
God, that's terrifying.
Yeah, it is absolutely terrifying, and so many people are waking up to these horrible things. And I think in the next part, I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that deferral that I'm talking about doesn't really work. It used to. And the thing is like you actually had a good reason for believing it to be true because, again, the U.S. is the only country in the world that taxes the way we do. And there's a lot of people who are dual citizens, and they might identify, say, with Germany more. You know, that they're German, they were born in the U.S., now they're living in Germany. They really don't think of themselves as a U.S. person. And they might have reported their U.S. income that was earned in an account, it's like a Chase Manhattan. They did that, but they never reported all their income in Germany because, again, what the hell does it have to do? Oh, and I have to tie up that loose end about Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. So it all makes sense. Universal tax jurisdiction makes sense. I'm getting it. Yeah.
Jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction. Makes sense if you understand the historical context of it and why the United States is the only country in the world with it. Okay, so we had a civil war.
Okay.
And
I'm with you. That
was called the Blue versus the Gray, or the War of Southern Rebellion, I think is how the North called it. The Union, which had a lot more resources, imposed a tax on income, but only super wealthy people. And so there was a lot of sort of maybe Yankees who are a little bit of scummy guys who evaded their and there was a draft. So there's a tax on income and a draft. So here's your solution. I really don't want to fight, and I really don't want to be taxed. So the solution is, oh, hi, Canada. Hey, nice to see you. So people would avoid the draft and avoid the taxation by just going overseas. And so they said, no, we're not going to allow that to happen. We can't have people, avoiding the draft, avoiding the payment of taxes by going overseas. And really, if you were rich, I think you could just pay your way out of the draft. So really avoiding the payment of doing your fair share for the defense of your union.
Yep.
So it's sort of, interesting to preserve the union of liberty. Lincoln said, yeah, we're just going to tax you no matter where you are. I don't know how many people actually were.
Yep.
But that is what happened. And then that first income tax, it's an act of war. That's what it was known. The income tax is a legitimate act of war. And I've mentioned before in the awesome tax, it's like if there's a war, you can charge an income tax. And I think that is something that is reasonable. And then post Reconstruction, the income tax continued, and then it did fall by the wayside once Reconstruction was over. There was no income tax. Now you have to think now, and then it's like 1896 they tried to get an income tax going again. It was struck down, but all these people were around, and they knew there's just sort of this inherent knowledge that of course your worldwide income is taxable. Of course it is, and so that's the thought of the time. Yeah, it just would be. So by the time in 1913 the Federal Reserve or the income tax is passed, it's assumed your worldwide income is taxable, even though if you look at that 16th Amendment, it's completely silent to it. So they say, yeah, it must be. And then it was a Supreme Court case in 1924, Cook versus Tate, that said, yeah, it was a gentleman in Mexico or something like that who had some rental income and said, no, it's taxable. And the reasoning was it was all passive voice. the cause of the tax was moved when the man came into the. It's completely unreadable. Getting to it and trying to interpret the most horrible legal writing is just like, yeah, because the U.S. is everywhere, kind of. Yeah. You got to pay for it. That's really their reasoning. And so it's 1924 that the Supreme Court just said, yeah, it's universal, even though there's really no reason why. It's just sort of the habit. It's Civil War, but they never said the Civil War.
Right.
They just, of course it would be.
It's like when I try to talk to my 12-year-old daughter. It just is. That's the way it is. Okay?
We like the money.
Yes.
Is the reason. Because.
Yeah. Because I'm right.
Because of reasons.
Because of reasons. All right, so coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about Subpart F.
Oh.
Which can be a little...
dense.
But we're going to try to simplify and lighten up a little bit right after this on Parental Advisory.
Claudine, how would you explain the IRS to an enemy?
I would say the IRS is about truth and justice and fairness.
Now, how would you explain the IRS to a friend?
In that case, I would say the IRS is like calm waters with sharks swimming right below the surface.
Can you see the sharks?
You might.
Can you feel the sharks?
They do tend to bite.
Now, let's say you wanted to go into the water. Could you safely go into the water with the sharks in the water as well?
You could safely do it with a shark cage, say.
Now, could IRSMedic be your IRS shark cage?
It's what we do best. IRSMedic, the law offices of Parent, and Wynn, LLP. Real tax attorneys for tough tax problems. We're back.
We're back.
Live on Parental Advisory. And we're talking today about surprises, about living and investing overseas. And when we first talked about doing the show, we were really going to focus on Subpart F. So I like to jump in and do some research. This one made my head hurt.
Okay, yeah.
It really did. My original idea was to do shots every time we said Subpart F, just so I could get through the tedium of the show. But we changed our minds and decided to make it a little wider, but still some basic facts that I could ascertain about Subpart F. It deals with U.S. taxation of amounts earned by controlled foreign corporations, which means any corporation organized outside of the U.S. that is more than 50% owned by U.S. shareholders. With me so far? It provides that certain types of income of CFCs, though undistributed, must be included in the gross income of the U.S. shareholder in the year the income is earned by the CFC.
So
what the is that? I could read again slower.
Yeah. So how to peel that stink onion back there without making someone want to vomit. This is the problem with the English language, I think.
And the IRS.
The problem with the IRS is it gets the English language. The English language is so versatile. It can describe so many things. The English language imports, it will borrow or steal from every language and allow you to do things that you shouldn't be able to do. Allow you to express ideas that would hopefully never, like that.
Yeah.
That idea should not be expressible.
No, it shouldn't. It should be a really short sentence with like 10 words.
It shouldn't be allowed to do that. There's too many dependent clauses in there and way too much going on.
Yes.
It should. I think we might need to have a ban on sentences that long.
Yes.
And I'll deal with the consequences. Right.
Yes.
If we can get rid of Subpart F,
I'll
that's fine. That's just dreadful.
So now what I do know is this. They enacted it in 1962.
Yep.
And Subpart F was designed to prevent U.S. citizens and resident individuals and corporations from artificially deferring otherwise taxable income through use of foreign entities. So basically, the IRS was saying you're abusing tax. They're calling it abusive tax transaction. You're setting up a corporation overseas. It's making money. And you're saying, but it's overseas. I don't have to pay taxes. Right.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's a much better explanation.
Okay.
That's really what people should think about when they hear that.
They should hire more blondes.
let's blonde this up a little bit.
Simplify.
I would prefer it. I mean, that is a little bit better. That's exactly the heart of the matter.
Okay.
Is that it used to be you invest over if you were going to prior to 1962. Well, I mean you could go invest overseas and be tax-free, or you could be tax-free until you bring the money back. And it all makes sense because you're allowed to do that with a 401k, right? You're able to put that money in and let it grow tax-free, and it's only when you withdraw it that you actually have to pay. right? So why can't you do that overseas? Well, because they like the money is number one. That's really it. Now, 401ks, if you make too much money, you can't put the money in anymore. So is that really fair? No. That, well, we don't like it. Or if you're not employed, you can't get into you can't get into a plan. That's kind of crappy. The IRS makes this so that you can't do what other people can do. And all you're doing is like, well, look, it's overseas. They have a military in that country. So if they want to tax it, they can. So you're really not there. And when it's brought here, you'll get what's ever come to you. So it's really a nasty little thing. That's what, and now there are ways you could still defer income. There are certain ways, and like, one trick is a foreign, okay, all right, I'll say this, foreign hedging commodity fund.
Okay.
Yeah, you're allowed to buy and sell gold. If you're using it to hedge against a risk like inflation, you could actually do that. If you were trading gold or silver or probably any commodity, really, if you have a commodity account, you could trade it on that overseas and defer all your gains. That is one way you can do it. It's it's a really hidden
Should we
thing
say
there.
for now? Because I feel like 401ks, PPLI, what you just said, eventually, do you think the IRS will go, oh, let's figure out how to screw them on this?
No,
too?
it's actually a cutout. And it's a carve out in the code, and you have to remember our rules. Like, well, what's the political influence behind that carve out of the rule? My guess it's Wall Street saying, oh yeah, well, we want to hedge.
Got it.
Yeah, I know. Screw everyone else, but we want this.
Yep.
So that's why they put that in there. It's an obvious section that was inserted. If it qualifies as this, here you go. You don't have to do it. It's till the end. So that's one thing you could do if you're going to invest. If you're looking, if you're investing in gold, if you're buying and selling gold, that's actually one place where it actually makes sense to go overseas. And also your gold, however, when it's taxed, your gold is actually taxed at a rate that's kind of comes out of nowhere. We went over our top ordinary tax rate of
39.6,
and then our long-term capital gain of 20%. There's actually a 28% tax on precious metals. It just comes from they were like, well, 20% is too low, 27 is too low, 29 is too high. Yeah, they're 28. Yeah, guys. Yeah. And then they didn't go with 28.6 either, because I would have kind of like
28.2, 28.4. So does Subpart F mean if you've got a corporation overseas, are you paying tax in that country and then also paying tax to the U.S.?
Well, you could. You certainly could. Now, you should, if there's a U.S. tax treaty with that country, you should be getting a tax credit for whatever you pay.
Okay.
Okay. So you want to make sure if you're in that country that there is a actual tax treaty to make sure these tax treaties are to avoid the double taxation.
Yes.
If not, you can be doubly taxed.
I was surprised when I went to the IRS website and looked up tax treaties, how many countries we don't have tax treaties with. There's a lot.
We don't end up. Yeah, who was the biggest one you can remember? Because I actually don't. Because we don't.
Well, was Hong Kong on there?
Is Hong Kong on there?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think we have a tax treaty with them.
Yeah, and that's
a big.
They still claim not to be China, but I don't know. I'm just reading today. There's some bookstores that shut down. Not looking good.
No.
Not. Yeah, maybe the British weren't that bad.
Maybe they had books that didn't fare well to the King of Thailand, so they said just to shut them down.
Yeah.
All right. So if you don't choose a country that has a treaty with the U.S., it can suck.
Yeah. And there still might be a way where you're not doing it either. And I think for some reason Hong Kong you will not get back, because we have a few clients in Hong Kong, and I think I would remember if they were double taxed.
Yeah.
And I think because Hong Kong doesn't really have a tax there.
Yep.
There's not much, and I think that's how you get out of it, because there's really not a lot of tax you're paying.
Okay.
So that's why it's not so bad.
Got it.
But if you're in a high tax jurisdiction, it could really hurt if you don't have that. Now, do you know who we have the oldest tax treaty with? This is a little trivia I have, and it makes sense.
Is it Great Britain?
There you go. Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah, I think 1816.
Makes
so it was like
sense.
one of the first things we did after we fought them, kicked their ass. After they fought us again, kicked us at their ass. We're like, all right, well, we're done with this. You know what we should really have is a tax treaty.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. So, and this is before any income tax. Well, Britain did have an income tax at that point.
They did.
They did. First. They already. Yeah. They were really. Well, they weren't the first, as we know.
Yeah, the Egyptians.
But, right. The Egyptians and tax farming. They were having one by then, and so that the U.S. UK tax treaty is the oldest around.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's sort of FATCA, sort of simplified. And we didn't need any liquor.
We didn't need any liquor. So
No.
do you think, should we go over more Subpart F and then we wanted to talk about Subpart E?
So yes. Well, what else do you have on Subpart F? Anything important you want to...
Now, Subpart F, it basically, this is what you need. This is the nasty thing about it. What it does is you could have a passive company that has a long-term capital gain, which should be taxed at that 20% rate, right?
Okay.
It says, no. It's not a long-term capital gain, even though it is.
Mm-hmm.
What it is, it's ordinary income.
Oh.
Yeah. And then they also kind of screw you with what kind of losses you can carry forward.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of losses you can take. So basically, it's written in a way that favors the IRS left and right in ways that are inconsistent. But they're like, yeah, well, that's Subpart F. That's why it's Subpart FU.
Standing for Subpart F University.
Yes.
We're learning about it.
Learning about how wonderful it is.
And you're right. When we started looking up Subpart, now I'm looking up Subpart D. We were curious if there was Subpart E.
Yeah.
And there is.
There is.
Which is the accelerated approval of biological products for serious or life-threatening illness. And
Okay.
it looks like there's a Subpart D. I'm assuming
Is that
there's...
FDA, though? That doesn't sound like... Who knows, though? Who really knows what is tucked away?
It is the FDA.
Okay. So that's, we would want 26, Title 26.
And then we've got Subpart D, that's the United States Department of Labor.
Okay.
I don't understand.
There really
that one.
might, you know what? You never quite know.
No,
you never know.
We might have Subpart A
There
through
is
Z.
absolutely something new you find out about the tax code pretty much every day.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way anyone in the world can know it all.
It's true. And as an example, when we had questions about Subpart F yesterday, we went upstairs to a team of extremely intelligent, knowledgeable people. And I think it took, we realized it was 5 people sort of sitting and brainstorming to come up with the answer.
Yeah,
and it's not because they're not smart. It's because the U.S.'s IRS tax code is convoluted and
that's how we realized we couldn't do a whole episode on Subpart F. Like, no one wants this.
No.
Just basically, it sucks.
Yeah.
And you don't know about it until you actually see it on your return. Then you're like, oh, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then that first time you see Subpart F, then you kind of get it. And that's just one of the things to watch out for when you're investing overseas is it really can bite you. And, and see, that's the thing. It's like, okay, your first nasty surprise was like, it's taxable. Mm-hmm. Second nasty surprise, it's taxable like that. Mm-hmm. So it's just a whole terrible thing.
So to wrap up this section, tell me your opinion. Is it worth now having corporations overseas, or do you just keep them here?
Well, here it is. Here's the lawyer answer. It depends.
Yeah.
It really depends. What are you doing? Do you want, there's times when it does. If you're investing in commodities, there's really a great time to do it. Mm-hmm. There are, the way that we have come with it, with a significant amount of work, you can experience a moderate tax savings going offshore. Okay, you can. There are things you can do, and it's just a very long, dense episode that no one would really want to live with. So I'm not saying that you can't do it, but to think of it as this magic wand, like, oh, offshore, there it is, everything's good. This is all I've been waiting for. Great, we're done. Mm-hmm. No. Yep. Not at all. That's just really the thing. That is not how it is all at all. Moving stuff overseas doesn't take it out of the taxation of the U.S. tax code. It's still taxable as long as you're a U.S. person.
Got it. And it makes me think of movies like, is it the Jason Bourne?
Born Identity?
Born Identity, when he goes to the Swiss bank. Like, they're not going to have that in movies anymore because nobody can hide their money in Swiss banks.
Right. This is something I've been told a few different people.
Yeah.
So let me tell you about the growth industry in Switzerland. So all of a sudden, a lot of bank vaults are overloaded safety deposit box. That the amount of whatever unknown, who knows what's in there, has gone up by who knows the factor of, there's probably 10,000% more safety deposit boxes all of a sudden since the crackdown on Swiss banks.
All right. So after the break, I want to talk about surprising places that actually are tax havens.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that right after this. Anthony, tell me about your recurring nightmare.
It's that nightmare where you're yelling, but no words are coming out of your mouth.
I have a similar nightmare where I'm in an emergency, I need to dial 911 and my phone won't work.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. And I think I know why we have these dreams.
Why is that?
The problem with the IRS isn't just the IRS. The problem is that people don't see the IRS for the horrible risk it presents.
I think you're right. We spend so much of our time trying to warn people about the IRS, but sometimes I wonder if our words go unheeded.
But the IRS can be dealt with the right team and the right preparation.
Can IRSMedic be the right team for someone with an IRS problem?
Yes, but only if they see the IRS as a problem.
IRSMedic, the law offices of Parent, and Wynn, LLP, real tax attorneys for tough tax problems.
We're back live on Parental Advisory, talking about surprises about living and investing overseas. We want to talk about now what we've sort of come to the conclusion that overseas banks, overseas investing, overseas corporations aren't the tax havens they once were, thanks to Subpart F and OVDP.
Well, OVDP is the program people who are using because of all the FATCA bank sharing information going on.
Yes.
Right. So that's a big part of it.
So the second thing I started investigating after Subpart F, when my brain hurt, was FATCA. This one is a little easier to understand, I think. It's the Foreign Account Tax Compliant Act.
And it's part of the what act of 2010?
I don't know.
The Hire Act.
Oh,
we were talking today about the current Drive Act that's pending in Congress,
but
right?
It has nothing to do with
which
Drive.
is called a backronym, according to Chen. It's called a backronym, something that's painfully made into an acronym.
Yes.
By coming up with the Hire Act of 2010 was just some part of the pork crap. So tucked into the Hire Act. And by the way, for people paying attention, people who don't like all this FATCA crap, you can thank all Democrats. This is actually something where not one Republican vote on this. 100% owned by Democrats. So just think about that. This is why FATCA goes around, right? So why don't you continue tell us the wonders about
so the
FATCA.
facts of it. So I know it's a federal law. Let's break it down into easy to understand. It's a federal law.
Correct.
It requires U.S. persons, including those living outside the U.S., to have yearly reported themselves and their non-U.S. financial accounts to, you have to report them. And it requires all non-U.S. financial institutions to search their records for suspected U.S. persons for reporting their assets and identities to the U.S. Treasury. So two different things. If you're a person, that means you have to file everything. And if you're a foreign bank, if you think you have a U.S. customer, you've got to tell the U.S. about it. Right?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really it.
And they enacted it to make it more, of course, they always like to make it more difficult for resident and non-U.S. persons to have, resident and non-resident U.S. persons to have financial assets which are not located in the United States. So it's just another way to get our money.
Yes.
Yes.
Because they're convinced, the IRS is always convinced that there's like trillions of dollars. If only we could tax more. There's all these people evading taxes, and we know. We're absolutely convinced. And it's just not that way.
Yes.
It's not that way. I mean, the amount of people that, the people call us from overseas, and when they say like, they maybe 3-4% of them were intentionally doing something. Maybe another 20% were negligent. And then a lot of people had like, I really had no idea. And that's the fact. Most people have no idea. And again, IRS has a bias that, everyone knows our laws. But IRS employee, did you know the IRS laws before you worked at the IRS? Do you know every IRS law? Because you can call the IRS right now. And I can guarantee you about 95% of the people will have no idea what FATCA is. 95% of the people won't know what an FBAR is. 95% of people won't know that your worldwide income is taxable. They have no idea.
Wow.
And so the IRS says, you should know. It's your duty. Don't you read your instruction book? That whenever you sign your return, you're saying like under penalty of law, and you're agreeing that you have read all the instructions and understand all the law. And that is a duty that is non-delegable. No matter who you hire, it doesn't matter. You as an individual are still responsible. The only way to get out of that is if you are deemed mentally incompetent.
Oh.
Yeah, or dead.
Good to know.
Or dead.
Okay.
So that is somewhat of the nasty little surprises about how the IRS works. It's like, well, you signed the return. You knew about it. Otherwise, but you don't have a choice.
Right.
You don't have a choice to say, well, I can't sign this return because I don't know. I don't know all the law, and I don't know if this is, I don't know. So like, well, just sign it to the best of your knowledge. Okay, but the best of my knowledge is the knowledge of a person who can't know it all. And I just told you, know what the IRS knows what everything is. And you can go upstairs to our brilliant tax department and say, okay, well, that's going to depend. And this is a gray area. How many of our answers come up with that? Like, this is the best answer we've come up in this situation because there is a few different arguments. And we present that to clients all the time. You can go this way. You can claim it like this. You can go this way, claim it like this. You can go this way. And then we sort of narrow it down and sort of like, well, what sort of risk profile do we want to have? And I think we're going to do a podcast on private letter rulings about, looking for IRS advice in advance of doing something where they're not even entirely sure themselves. Like, well, this isn't law. Just so you know.
Yeah.
We'll reduce your penalties if you're wrong, but we really don't know. So that's something where, what's required of you as a taxpayer. And again, no other country in the world does this.
No.
There's other jurisdictions that are high tax. No one is as ridiculously compliant, requires a compliance and work that the IRS does. And something about FATCA is it's kind of all these countries have signed on to it. It's like, way to go, dummy. Way to go. Because guess what? You guys don't have universal tax jurisdiction. Who cares if your people are investing in the U.S.? And by the way, and as you teased so brilliantly before this break, you said you're going to talk about the number one tax shelter or tax haven in the world.
Guess where it is.
And guess what it is?
United States of America.
There you go. Guess who doesn't have to comply with FATCA?
United States of America.
That's right. So a foreign person here in FATCA, guess how many banks do you think, I've opened an account down at the branch lately. They didn't ask me for my citizenship. They didn't ask me for any of that.
Nope.
But if you were a U.S. person trying to open a bank anywhere around the globe, what are they going to tell you?
No.
We don't want you.
Right. And expats are suffering because a lot of banks are going, you know what? We don't want anything to do with you. They could be on the up and up. They don't want to give them mortgages. They're closing their accounts. It's costing other countries money.
Yes.
So, for instance, the British government estimated the cost of compliance for FATCA for UK businesses would be between $80 and $150 million a year.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, and it's probably actually more than that. I think there's, and what's funny about the UK, right? UK is one of the places where if you're not living in the UK, it's only your UK based income. But if you're living if you're living in, I think even in Bermuda, if you're living in Bermuda, UK citizen, whatever, that's tax free for you. So they don't even need the information. It's like, what were you guys thinking? I don't understand. And I've talked to some higher up people in various smaller countries to say, guys, why is it everyone's asleep at the switch? You agree to this crap. Do you understand what the tax code is doing to your country? How one-sided it is? How everything works into the U.S.'s favor? And this is the prime example that the U.S. wants you to do all this work, and you get squat because we don't comply with FATCA.
No.
And if there is because there's varying degrees of some countries have some stuff is taxable overseas, some isn't.
Yep.
Or it's really what they're really looking for isn't necessarily that the money is earning, it's tax free. But I think it's Colombia is a country where people make money and then they move the money that they evaded taxes on, they moved it. So it's not necessarily the countries want that information or should want that information here in the U.S. Because the people owe taxes on what's currently going, but because how did you get all that money to begin with? Because according to your tax return, you don't have any money, but you have all this money in the United States. Where did that come from? It just magically appeared one day. So they really would want to know how much money is in the U.S., but they're never going to get it.
No. So there's something called the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. Okay. So what they have is a global automation information exchange for bank data. The United States refuses to participate. Because of that, I think it's put us third. U.S. trails only Switzerland and Hong Kong and a league of offshore havens refusing to share information. So all the other countries are sharing, and the U.S. is like, nah. No, we're not going to.
No, it's just too much of a burden on our, and again, this Wall Street's a lobby in D.C. We're like, nah, we're not going to do that. That's too much work for us. So we're not going to do it. And the thing is this is what's crazy is like, so U.S. citizens overseas, this is a second-class passport. That U.S. passport is a bag of crap.
Yes.
And even if you open that account because a lot of people are dual citizens, so they're like, okay, this U.S. passport's no good. Let me go and get my other passport, whatever they might happen to have. And they go open the account, and the person's like, either, well, you sound American. Okay, we got a problem. Or, okay, fine. Just give us some information about you. And if there's anything that ties you to America, an American phone number, American address, anywhere that pops up, now it's that bank's affirmative duty to investigate, are you a U.S. person or not? So just opening it up with a passport that has nothing to do with America. I mean, talk about an invasion of privacy. Every person at that bank, their privacy is being invaded by the IRS. Or that's freaking nuts. They aren't U.S. persons, but they're searched anyway. Well, we had to search your stuff.
Right. And then if they find they are a U.S. citizen, then they have to contact IRS and say they open this account?
They typically contact the bank, the account holder, and say, hey, here, fill out this form. If you don't, we'll tell the IRS about you.
And then there's also something that just recently happened. The IRS is swapping taxpayer data with other countries, only reciprocal exchanges with foreign jurisdictions, meeting the IRS's standards for privacy and technical standards. So the IRS will give other countries information, but only if if it's like a swap, it sounds like.
Wow.
Yeah.
You show us yours, we'll show you. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's happening is a lot of people overseas, U.S. citizens, they're trying to just rescind their citizenship.
Yeah.
They're like, screw it. So the banks want nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
They want nothing to do with the United States. I don't.
But now you're at how do you prove a negative? How do you prove that you're no longer a U.S. person? Because they're like, well, we still think you are.
Right.
How do we know? You don't get a certificate from the State Department. Here's your certificate that you have. It's like, no, show us your lack of passport. Well, everyone has that, right? That's pretty easy.
And something you touched on that I think is important is the amount of revenue the program has brought in. I think the U.S. was like, there's going to be trillions of dollars.
Yes.
And so far, they haven't found trillions of dollars.
No.
A great comparison I saw was it's like they're trying to kill some ants with a sledgehammer.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not paying off how it should. Of course, they probably have great press releases when they bring in a few.
Right,
million.
and I would imagine just like, we have the Drive Act where the U.S. is going to be, or the IRS is going to be revoking passports of people who owe $50,000 or more. And then there's some claim like that's going to bring in, $10 billion. Sure, it's all made up. Someone just made it up. They put it in a bill because every bill has to be revenue, neutral or whatever, which is it's like, yeah. And I'm going to tell you the part you really don't care about. Just put in numbers, make sure this all adds up.
Yes.
That's all. It needs to add up. There you go. So just come up with some numbers. So they're convinced that's going to do that. And I would imagine FATCA was the revenue offset for the HIRE Act. So, this is going to bring in, this will really do it. And it really hasn't. I mean, the IRS is bragging about the $8 billion its OVDP programs brought in. Oh, my God. Well, that's since 2009. So every year you're bringing in a few billion. And then that's really not a lot of money, especially when you think about the $21 billion a year the IRS admits to being lost through identity theft. That's what it just admits to, and there's a hell of a lot more than that.
Right. There's no press releases on those.
No. They don't want to tell you, like, that's so easy to get us.
Yep.
And there was a press release today from the IRS that they got somebody who scammed out of $1.5 million. Okay. And then this is something that really just rubs me the wrong way. So that person who went and stole money, okay? That person went and stole money, gets a $250,000 fine. They stole, and it's like they ripped off $1.5 million. Okay, well, it seems like that would be taxable income. It's interesting you didn't get them for the taxes. If they stole that money, you should say, well, you should be guilty of tax evasion too because you didn't pay the money on that, and at least you owe taxes on what you stole. That wasn't there, and then there's a fine of $250,000 and up to 3 years in prison. Now that's the same as someone who commits tax evasion. Wait a second. So the person who thinks that, well, this is my money because I've earned it, you're putting them on the same legal, moral plane as someone who goes and steals money in a conspiracy to rip off other people. It's so backwards.
That's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous that someone who evades taxes.
Right.
And so many times these tax evasion things are complete nonsense. The IRS doesn't know what they're talking about.
Right.
They always tend to go after the wrong person. Because
Well,
they're
the
just
easy person.
The easy person, right. That's who they, again, that's what they're really interested in.
And someone who could have actually made an honest mistake.
Right.
Never mind the person who went and stole.
That's something you just don't make an honest mistake about.
Right.
And so it's like, so what happens with that $1.5 million they have? Oh, all right. So they have 1.25. Okay. 3 years. I think a lot of people would take that deal. So I'll have to do is 3 years. All right. So, all right. It's not going to be fun, but it's not going to be that bad.
I'll work out a lot. I'll get in good shape.
Yeah. I'll probably lose weight.
Yeah.
I'll meet some interesting people who can help me with my next scam.
Yes. All right, so let's wrap up. I'll ask you the same question I ended the second segment with.
Yeah.
Is it worth investing in living overseas for a regular person, not just a corporation?
Yeah, if you want to live overseas, I would say
it's doable?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's just that you have to be aware the compliance costs go up. That's all. You can absolutely do it. If that's a lifestyle you want, great, wonderful. But just don't don't go into it blind.
Right.
Understand that everything on compliance is complicated 10 times.
Right.
Okay? And the cost for compliance, well, it's not magnified 10 times, but it's at least magnified 5 times. You know, your tax return, if your CPA usually charges you $1,500 for your tax return in the US, you go overseas, you might have a tax return of $6,000. You really might, and that's not even that crazy.
And now IRSMedic generally deals with people who have IRS issues. They're getting liens, they're getting notices, and they come to you guys for help. If it's somebody considering moving overseas, can they contact IRSMedic just for advice on how to do it correctly?
Well, I mean, that's a benefit is we've had years of showing how not to do things.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's what I like about it is that we know exactly how the problems people do and the misconceptions that people have. And I think that's what's good is that I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking, that you're going to be able to get away with this because you're not, so many of our clients are so good, are great. And they've had these misconceptions that are completely reasonable. It's like, you're reasonable. That's your problem. You're not crazy in the head. That's what you need to have.
It's not supposed to make sense. All right. Well, I hope we sort of broke down Subpart F into manageable and FATCA into manageable.
I think you did a great job. I think we need to blonde up the IRS.
Yeah, we really do. Well, thanks so much for listening today on Parental Advisory. Thanks for joining Parental Advisory, hosted by Anthony Parent, produced by Claudine Gindel, that's me, engineered by Chris Chen. For more podcasts, visit our website at parentaladvisoryshow.com and like us on Facebook to submit story ideas. We'd like to thank our sponsors, IRSMedic.com, the law offices of Parent, and Wynn, LLP, real tax attorneys for tough tax problems.